Good morning everybody, and welcome to this fourth of seven additional city profiles for the GI Sustainable Cities module. I hope you're all okay and had a nice Easter and are keeping safe and well. Today's profiles, for today particularly, we'll talk about Singapore, and Singapore is a very interesting and almost unique case simply because of its geography, because of its political structure, and the way in which the environment is used to frame development within the city-state itself. So Singapore is an island nation. It's a lot bigger than you might think, and it has a very, very strong social policy for the delivery of benefits for the entire population. And that can be around housing, it can be around employment, it can be around service infrastructure, and it also means that they're quite strong on their environmental policy in terms of green infrastructure, climate change, air pollution and water management. So one of the things to think about with Singapore is the fact that although it's a very small country compared to other places such as China or France or Canada or Australia, for instance, the actual scale of investment is quite important and high for the entirety of the nation itself. So a large proportion of the city-state are made up of large areas of green infrastructure. And because of this, there are these intersections, almost spurs or spikes of GI that run through the island and into major areas of population. So there's a co-location of GI in Singapore, which is quite fundamental to quite a lot of the way in which development happens. And aligned to this are a number of different areas around, or different ideas around the economy, around socio-cultural understanding of space, the politics of landscape and environmental management, and the policy of it. And a lot of it comes out of the 1960s and the creation of Singapore's current sort of environmental structure and political structure, and the fact that there was supposed to be an equity of distribution of services and resources to the people of the country. So there's been quite a long history of investment in the environment to try and mitigate against climate change, but also to try and deliver services to people who are living and working there. And a lot of this is around this combination of climatic or environmental benefits, be it reactions to climate change, air quality, water management, surface water flooding, but also the provision of locations where people can access them free of charge, so you don't have to pay to go to the park, and the provision of GI in close proximity to most residential areas. So one thing that you will see if you look through Singapore and the spatial mapping of Singapore is that most housing blocks or most developments will actually be situated within quite a large area of GI or be very close to a large park or area of coastline. And these are all things that are almost unique to Singapore. Maybe something like New York is similar, given that it's an island area, but it's very different to what you would see in other parts of East and Southeast Asia, or particularly in Europe. And one thing that we can identify in Singapore is a level of modernity, a level of contemporary understanding of the links between the environment and society. And there are numerous examples of where new parks have been developed or existing parks have been repurposed and redesigned to provide a better access and understanding of environmental functions. So the gardens in the bay, or gardens by the bay, the big sort of landmark site in Singapore in the centre of the city, shows the different habitats, shows what you can do with landscape architecture, but it's also there as an educational tool for people to understand about the way in which climate can be mitigated through the investment in GI. And it's a tourist attraction. You don't have to pay to get in, but you have to pay to access some of the areas. But it does illustrate that there's a way of looking at the environment in a number of different manners, being very formal or more organic, which can allow people to interact with nature. And it's situated in front of a very, very urbanized area, and even the hotel behind it with the rooftop forest on top of the hotel gives you some indication that there is this level of comparison between understanding of GI and investing with it in new developments. In addition, you've got a large concentration of discussions on water and the management of water bodies, be it lakes or rivers or even the coastline, because this is central to the management of Singapore, particularly in the monsoon season. So you get images like the one on the right there, which is from a park in the centre of Singapore, where you start to see monsoonal flooding and a rise and a fall in that river, depending on how much rainfall there is. So that actual image is a picture of a wetland and a water basin that can rise purposefully to actually allow people to still use the park whilst stopping on-street flooding. And I visited this park at about 7:30 on a Sunday morning, and there were hundreds of people there using it already, because it was quite cool, and it was a place that lots of different activities, be it football, be it rollerblading, be it badminton, be it dancing, could all happen at the same time. And these sort of parks are located very close to high-rise urban developments. So although you might not have your own private garden, you do have an expansive area of GI very locally to you, which you could use as your private garden. We also have this link between GI in the formal senses and GI from a more botanical sense. So Singapore has a botanical garden, it has a horticultural centre which goes along with it. So they're learning and they're learning about the nature of the landscape and the flora and fauna that are actually in Singapore, and looking at how they can be more resistant to climate change. And part of that is around landscape architecture and structuring GI within a more formal sense. But other things are about being responsive to the way in which different plants actually respond to changes in heat, in wind, in temperature, in rainfall. So Singapore has been quite advanced in terms of using different mixes of plants to try and get the right combination of vegetation and built environment to moderate the extremities of the city. And then you get things such as the Singapore Grand Prix. So you can see some of the infrastructure there in the middle of this picture, and this is next to the Opera House, and the Opera House is situated next to the bay, so there's quite hard infrastructure on one side, but it's shielded from the road, it's shielded from this pollution, this noise, by quite an ornate garden. So in this case they're framing the cultural asset of the Opera House with something that's slightly more diverse than you would get in a more formal garden, and it allows people to interact and meander around the place, and provides different environmental experiences than what you would get in a more formal plaza. And then the picture on the right there is from the centre of Singapore, near a hotel and near a shopping complex, and it's a large piece of grass, a very formal set out, but it utilises street trees, shrubs, hedges, grassed areas and water to bring together a location that is both aesthetically pleasing but also something that people can interact with and spend time in, hence the benches. So across Singapore there's this understanding of scale, so there's very large GI that permeates through the city, big parks, big waterways, and there's more local interpretations and developments that are made to allow people to interact with the environment more personally. And I think one of the great things about Singapore is that they can marry the contemporary nature and understanding of water and climate with those more sociological and cultural understandings of place that are intrinsic to the Singaporean mindset. And a lot of this is down to the way in which the city-state is managed and that very sort of top-down approach, but also a buy-in from the people of Singapore to actually appreciate that the landscape is part of their wider social and cultural understanding of place, but also they're places that people can interact with on a daily basis. They also help to moderate the temperature, so even here when it was late September, it was still very, very hot, and there were lots of people using these GI resources as a way of just getting out of the sunshine and getting away from some of the humidity. So unlike other places, Singapore is maybe far more forward-thinking, far more innovative in terms of what it's doing, and it's something that I would recommend you have a look at if you are interested in terms of how you can do the big and the shiny and the bold and the innovative with more nuanced, locally specific and locally aesthetically pleasing forms of GI. Okay, I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you again soon.